Welcome everyone to another segment of Chief Speaks on Enlightenment and Transformation. Of course, we are broadcasting via YouTube. We are broadcasting via Blog Talk Radio and however else you are choosing to tune in. I just want to welcome you all. And my name is Chief Yuya, and I am the conductor of this experience that we call Chief Speaks. And this month we're dealing with the topic of living the culture. As many of you know, this has been a culminating month in many senses, in that we've kind of gone through some of the topics that we've discussed for the 2016 Gregorian year. And living the culture deals with, of course, taking all of those topics and putting them into a cohesive, functional, and organizational model in order to not only achieve, but properly measure success. So in that, we live the culture now. We live the culture that we have been taught, which of course cultivates the mind, purifies the mind, ennobles the mind, and consequently ennobles life, purifies life. So this segment, I want to deal with this topic again, but I kind of want to keep it a little looser, and mainly because I just feel to. You got to go with the flow of things, and you got to go with the spirit of things. And as I was preparing to do this Sunday segment, I kept kind of drawing a blank in a sense. And my preparation usually just involves about 5 minutes of thinking about what angle is next, because the primary work goes into preparing the topics for the year and the order and the mathematics of the topics, and how the months and the horoscopes or the horoscopes or the time of year correlates to whatever it is that I'm going to be talking about that month. Now, once I ritualize that from a conceptual space, the heavy lifting is done, really, and then it's just because that's when you're making that topic or that energy sacred. You're giving it its proper attention and its propers. So then after that, then you just look at what angle works best based on who it is that you're speaking to. So usually I'll give myself a couple of minutes to think about the subsequent angle based on whatever I spoke about last, or I'll look at common questions that have come in regarding the subject and then present based on that. So pretty much things that I was coming up with, I wasn't really feeling. And then I thought about the whole aspect of feeling as a vital and elemental component of culture itself, and how, of course, culture and the mechanisms of culture develop a mind. So, if we could visualize, again, like our arts and our entertainments and our education and our religion and our habits and our fashion and our language, they're all transmitters of a culture. And if you could look at all of them as being receptors that are screwed into the brain of an individual, they are receptors that cultivate different parts of the brain, which again opens up different parts of the mind. So, but what is required there is a sensitivity to the inherent messages and the values of those cultural tools. And interesting enough, I was speaking to someone earlier today in a conference, a consultation, and we were speaking about the Bible. And one of the things that I shared was that there are different levels of reading in all things. There are different levels of comprehension in all things, and no one level is the right one and no one level is the wrong one. So if someone reads a story and they see nothing but a story, that's fine. If someone reads a story and they see an allegory, that's fine. If someone sees a story and they see coded symbols, that's fine. If someone reads a story and they see occult rituals that lie within the story, that's good too. You know, there's different levels and inner levels to all things. Just like we all have inner levels to ourselves. All things that exist around us, they have a increasing inner depth to them. So some of us are more sensitive to the inner depths of things than others. And your increased sensitivity does not make you better, nor does it make you more correct than one who has less sensitivity. This goes back to what I was speaking about last strong in terms of the fine mind and the coarse mind. So some have a greater sensitivity to the granules or the fine grains of the fine mind, and some are dealing more with the coarse matter reality. And honestly, as we all mature and we all grow and we all age per se, our sensitivity and our ability to feel the subtle movements of the fine mind decreases. Okay. And that decreasing is usually a product of not receiving a certain level of training, a certain level of understanding earlier on in our lives. You know, so for many of us, our socialization, especially within the context of our family, begins to shape our attitudes. And not only does it shape our attitudes, but it shapes our perspective of things, right? And that framework that we're given as a result of that familial shaping then helps us to either be more sensitive to certain things in the world or less sensitive to certain things in the world. That's why you have certain individuals in your families. You may share some of the things that you're learning with them, and their reaction to you is really disdain and ridicule, because they have not really, their socialization or your general socialization that exists within your family hasn't led to an appreciation of the finer things in life. You know how we use that phrase often? Appreciation of the finer things. So what are the finer things really? The finer things are usually the more subtle things, you know. The subtle quality of something, the attention to detail and design, you know, the durability of something, the classic design of something, you know, we would call that the finer things, you know, because certain things with even in a fractal perspective, even when you look at design, they're time held. They always work. For instance, you take a car, smooth lines on a car always work. You know, that's why you may look at a 1982 Volvo 240, which was basically a big box, and you can immediately date it, but you may look at a 1980 Porsche or a Jaguar, and though you know it's kind of a classic, it's difficult to date because of the smoothness and the fluidity of the lines that go into the vehicle. Okay, just for a small example. And of course, you have the same thing in clothing. You have the same thing in anything. When you pay more attention to the finer granules or the finer grains of the sciences that you're dealing with, it becomes something that holds in you. It becomes something that's living and that's alive in you. You see, so I was reflecting on that in our talks about culture and how some individuals get it, some don't. Basically, you know, to make it very simple, some get it and some just don't get it. Some will never get it. Some have very hard, demarcated, defined beliefs and values and behaviors and attachments to materialism that they've received from particular groups of people, and that has become their common way of life. So when you start to introduce ideas about developing a finer culture or a deeper understanding of a cultural framework to work inside of, it seems like you're speaking something that's that's fruitless. It's pointless. What's the point in doing that? Like, I remember one time speaking in a workshop, and an individual who was a father to, there was the family, well, I can't even say the family, he was the ex-husband of a woman, and she had a couple of children. She had children by 3 different men, but this was one of the fathers was there. And I remember him, like, he had an issue with me, which I kind of sensed, and this is kind of what we're talking about, even our ability to sense things. And I remember him saying, I was speaking about the system and some of the failings of it. And he jumped up and he said, the system works. Why do you keep talking about the system? I like the system. It works. And I said, okay, well, fine. It works for you, for where you're at and for what you're dealing with. The system works fine for what it is that you're striving to be, but others are looking for a more intimate and innate connection with their human culture. And the system doesn't necessarily provide the principles and transmitted traditions from generation to generation that allows that flexible culture to stay in place, or that flexible, innate, righteous culture to stay in place for them. You see, so I'm not saying that he was wrong, and I'm not saying that I was right, but sometimes we can feel and sense when there is a gap, or there is a drop, or there is a chasm that exists between our sharings of our faiths and our thoughts and our cultural basis. So I wanted to speak briefly on the effects of that lack of sharing, the effects on not having that, on losing the cultural transmissions, and why it's so important. Well, one of the first things to understand about culture and culture's linkage to the biological evolution of us all is what your culture does, as I said previously, that it purifies and ennobles the life, and it develops the mind. Okay, and what culture also does is it brings rhyme and reason and relevancy to the creative spirit that exists in all people. Okay, and of course, this is expressed and this is framed in a diverse way for diverse people, because there are different ways of expressing life. You see, there are different ways of holding and encapsulating life within the body, okay, or within an organism. And these different ways become different cultures. And we can share our cultures. We can share how this is the way I hold life. This is the way you hold life. This, that, and so forth and third. And for some who want to really promote and share that way of holding life, they create religions. Okay. And a lot of times we confuse religions with a tyrannical absolutism of reward and punishment, or justice-based doctrine. We confuse it with that when it's truly just a way. Like we have the Tao. The Tao means the way. The Tao Te Ching, the way. So there are different ways. In fact, speaking to the individual earlier, the early Christians were not called Christians, of course, but they were called followers of the way. That was the terminology that was used, followers of the way. You see, so there are many different ways. There are many different ways to hold life. For some, we have hip hop culture, for instance, is a way of holding life. So life transmits to me the ability to transmit my ideas and my thoughts and my beliefs and my faiths. And I can frame that into a certain linguistic framework. And within that framework, I can choose to use words and sounds in a way that transmits my enthusiasm about the life force that's inside of me. You see, and some individuals have the ability to transmit the ideas and the lifestyles and the symbols and the attaching significance of how they hold life better than others. Okay. And again, to reiterate, it doesn't mean that the individuals themselves are better than others. Okay. Because in fact, the moment that they choose to transmit that culture, the first decision that they have to make is to totally typify said culture. And then they make a decision of vulnerability, where they say, okay, well, I'm going to be vulnerable to this form, this pattern design that I've now discovered, or I've even created. I'm going to be vulnerable to that. And then I'm going to share that in order to compel others to become a part of this, so that we can compel what our future will be. See, that's one of the key pieces about culture that we miss so much. Culture helps to establish your expectations. So when someone does something to you, or someone does something around you, or you do something, your culture determines what is acceptable and what is unacceptable based on the future that you're striving to compel as a result of your culture. You see, so I felt it was important to speak on this because a lot of times when I look within the conscious groups, there is a certain measure of damaging behavior that we've all witnessed, and often we don't know where to properly place and put that behavior. We don't know if we should accept it, if we should shun it, or how it should appear to us. And for some who are choosing to teach and to give information and to provide certain things, sometimes, like I was speaking to someone today, and this kind of brought across the idea a little bit. She was wondering, she does a lot of community work and lecturing, and like she felt it just seems that no one is listening. And I'm not able to really get to where it is that I'm trying to get to, the platforms that I'm trying to get to, that would, where I feel my highest potential is. For some reason, it's just not working. And what I had to tell this individual is what I would say about many other individuals and the conscious groups. The people see you as nothing as entertainment. Now, if you could understand why you are nothing but entertainment, then you would understand the crucialness of culture. So how does someone go from being an educator to an entertainer in the eyes of the demographic, in the eyes of the population, in the eyes of society? How does what they do become entertainment? The moment that one sees a contradiction in whatever it is that you're doing, you immediately get regulated to entertainment. You no longer become a vital component to that individual's or that group's culture. Now, you may still be listened to, you may still be enjoyed, but not for educational purposes, and surely one is not necessarily going to support you, because again, you're seen as entertainment. And sadly, with many of the speakers and the groups that you see out today, and sometimes even in our own lives, it's important for us to search ourselves for those contradictions that exist, sometimes the lunacy and the insanity that exist. And many of us, because of a lack of culture, have become so accustomed to lunacy flowing in and out of us, saying one thing, doing another, affirming one thing, doing another. And we don't understand, as a result of that, we lose the enthusiasm of the people. Whereas you'll look at other people and say, well, why are they being supported? They're not talking about anything, or they're not really doing anything, or this and that and that, because it's very clear and obvious that they were never going to do anything. That was their stance from the very beginning. So your average, let's say, mumble rapper, will get more support than your conscious rapper, who seems to vacillate between consciousness and very idiotic life decisions. You see, So once that occurs, and you can put the banner up as much as you want and say, hey, I'm just human. I'm just human. Don't follow what I do, follow what I say. But sadly, for all those who are attempting that, human psychology doesn't work that way. Okay, so you'll still be watched and listened to because you're entertaining, but who remembers clowns? The specific clown. You may be entertained by a clown, but you don't necessarily want to bring a clown into your life. Very important thing for a lot of you men to understand too. A lot of times you strive to bring women into your lives through buffoonery. You make them laugh, and that's cute, but nobody wants to marry a clown. You're entertaining. You're nothing but entertainment. So, I thought it was important in terms of culture for us to understand a lot of times without the framework and the holding and the saddling of culture, we end up becoming walking contradictions because we really don't know what it is that we're trying to compel. But when you're attached onto a future vision of whether it be of political power or ethical power, spiritual power, or just, some type of posturing destination that you want to, it could just be peace, then everything that works behind that works backwards will cease to contradict itself. If it's not, you'll look at the things that are congruent with that destination based on what your culture says. This is where you should be. This is where you need to be. You see, and a lot of times we lose step on that because in our movements towards self-improvement, self-cultivation, community rearing, and conscious information, we focus a little bit too much on the origin of things. To quote Listervelt Middleton, in fact, that was a song that I performed. I created some music around some years ago, many years ago at this point, on the origin of things. Beautiful poem written by Listervelt Middleton. And the thing to understand there is that the focus has to come away from the origin of things and more on the invocation of the origin of things, because that's how you transmit the fractal value of the great creators going forward. Okay, so for instance, when we look at the invocation of the origin of things, is one example you can use. Okay, this is a question that was asked of me not too long ago. Someone asked me something about, they were having trouble with cigarettes and quitting smoking and wanted to know a ritual to quit smoking cigarettes, which of course I gave an answer, not what they were expecting. But the point is, I said, first you want to look at really the sacredness of the tobacco itself, because that's what's really throwing you off. It's not just the addictiveness of the nicotine, it's the sacredness of the tobacco. So it spanned, it created an entire conversation that we had just around smoking and tobacco. And I said, it was said in older years that it was the Pawe, and this was a clan, a First Nation clan. It was said that tobacco was owned by the Pawe because one day a fisherman was fishing by the river, and he fished a fish out of the river, and the tobacco plant was when he was gutting the fish to prepare it for consumption, the tobacco plant was found inside. You see, so now if you look at that again, does that tell us where tobacco comes from? Not really, but it invokes the ownership of the creators, of the sacredness of it. You see, and that's a subtle element of culture. It's not so much about we were the first to build the pyramids. Okay, let's speak about why the pyramids are yours, not who was the first. Because the truth be told, let's be honest. If we keep it 100, and I've been to Kemet, I've been all around the African continent. I've hit what I call the 5 points, and then some. you can't really pinpoint who exactly built the pyramids and why. Now, I know that's going to come with a lot of backlash. I know. But here's the bottom line. You weren't there. No matter what you say to me, no matter what book you show me, no matter what picture you show me, and again, I've been there. I've put my hands on the pyramids. No matter what you do, you don't know the first person who sat in their backyard and said, we're going to put up a pyramid. You don't. And that goes for all of this, because we're talking about historical perspective, and we spend so much time focusing on the academics of the history and not the force inside of the history that keeps it alive. And that's the claiming of such. You see, and that's a part of what culture does. You see, so when we speak about the origins of the world in Yoruba culture, we speak about life emanating from Ile Ife and moving outwards, and we create an ownership story surrounding that. So from a Nigerian perspective, it gives it gives a perspective of world pride, of global ownership and global pride, because we're saying that we have a place, and we have a place of, we can invoke ownership over the globe based on this story or this mythio-geographical place in our culture, as opposed to, and I'm not saying this is not a call for us to negate the values of science, to negate the values of authentic dating or anything. I'm not saying that. So I'm not saying let's move into a realm of complete mysticism and assumptive reasoning and remove ourselves from the logic rationale of science. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that when we're speaking about culture, it serves a purpose of cupping and holding and cradling even our scientific pursuits. Like, why does the U.S. spend so much money on off-world efforts? Why? And we've been told for years that, because we may find things on other planets that would help solve some of the problems here. Honestly, think about that for a second. You're roaming around in the dust of other planets, and the majority of the problems that you have here on this planet are man-made. So why don't you just repent of your actions and begin there? You don't need some sacred space rock that teaches you how to make a lighter version of some type of metal alloy to solve the problems of war and famine, when there's plenty of peace to go around in the world, and there's plenty of food to go around in the world. You see? So obviously there's another mission there that's defined within the culture. There's another mission of creator and origin ownership that's being sought out there. So a lot of times our culture, it doesn't transmit to us the right values and understandings based on the innate and subconscious and psychological need to find meaning and reason in all that we're doing. You see? And when that's not present, there's a problem there. There's a serious problem. When we speak about those who are able to sense and see the finer value, because a lot of what I'm saying right now will go directly over the heads of many people listening, and some will get it, right? Now, let's take a look at something for a second. Let's take a look at, we'll go to Kemet for a second, right? And if we look at the idea of the Djed, right? Now, of course, many of you know that was later taken by George Lucas, and he gave us the idea of the Jedi, which again were these knights, which again were Moors, of course. But the Djed or the Jedi were to sustain and hold the balance of things throughout the universe. Well, and we know, of course, the Djed represented stability in a culture. The Djed was also symbolized with the human spine. Okay, now, of course, in many systems and many understandings, we have this idea of the Djed or the human spine, and oftentimes that human spine will also correlate itself to a tree as well. So that's why in so many cultures you have the origins or the sacred beginnings revolve around some sort of tree. Okay, because we're speaking about the verticalness, we're speaking about the obviously the spine, but the character that's developed. Even when you get into ideas surrounding the Kundalini, okay, again associating itself with the spine, okay, and you have in George Lucas' world, because he's created his own world. It's another science of culture, the Jedi. And what makes a Jedi, or one who's a Djed, or one who's just an upholder and a restorer of Ma'at, is their ability or their sensitivity to the life force that's around them. You see, and does it make them better than anyone or what? No. It's just some of us have a greater sensitivity to the light force that surrounds us. Okay. And even when you look at, and that's a level, that's not the ultimate level. See, that's the key. Even if you look at Lucas lore, I think there was a scene in, again, I'm not that versed in the order of the movies and stuff, but the first Star Wars, which I guess was the fourth one technically or something like that. But when you have Obi-Wan Kenobi describing the Force to Luke Skywalker, he says it is created by all the living things around us, and it sustains everything. It flows through us, and it's all around us. So essentially we find out the Force itself is created by living organisms. Okay, the Force itself is created by living organisms. Now we do have things, that, and our ability to pick up on that energy around us is determines what we call our degree of spirituality. Some can pick up on a subtle energy and some can't. Now, your cultural ceilings can lock you off from this ability or increase your ability. And what I mean by that is this: I see so many moments, and even in my day, where I see that individuals have really and truly and honestly lost the ability to socialize with one another. Now, if you can't socialize with other humans, which is a form of cultural transmission, because how else is it transmitted to you? Your culture is transmitted through your socialization. And when your socialization is locked down, then you lose the ability to receive and to give to other forces and energies around you. You see? So, and again, remember, your culture it attaches not only a spiritual, but a civic and a mental and a chronological significance to everything that's around you. Your culture attaches a significance to the color of the walls in your house, to the type, or what kind of dining room table are we going to use? Are we going to have a glass dining room table, or are we going to have a wooden dining room table? Is it going to be round, or is it going to be rectangular? Is it going to be square? Your culture attaches itself to what kind of curtains will you have? What color curtains will you have in your house? Your culture attaches itself to what kind of shoes you're going to wear, to what kind of language that you're going to speak, what kind of tone that you take with the individuals around you. How you interact with people. Do you even interact with the people around you? What am I going to eat tonight? Where am I going to get what I'm going to eat? Am I going to grow it myself? Am I going to buy it? Who am I going to buy it from? I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So the culture defines the significance of your lifestyle. And the significance of your lifestyle helps to either strengthen the sensitivity to the forces that are around you, or it desensitizes you to the forces that are around you. Now, remember, your sensitivity to the forces that are around you are how we define our magical ability in most cases, because For many, they see magic only as the ability to move things that they're not apparently and blatantly touching. So if I swipe my hand and I knock 5 stones off of a wall, then one would say I'm a powerful Ugan, I'm a powerful magician, I'm a powerful sorcerer, just by my ability to do that. Now, my sensitivity to the forces that exist around those stones and the forces that exist around me would define my ability to perform such feats of psychotelekinesis, okay, which I can do and have done. All right. Now, my culture can lock me down from that by building up greater layers around me to desensitize me to the forces and the powers around me. You see? And a lot of times when our world is filled with those contradictions and we become entertainment of ourselves, we lose sight of the greater and more potent energy that exists within us. You see, our culture then becomes toxic and we're unable to properly distinguish between the dust and the snow. Let's think about that for a second. What is the difference between snow and dust? You see, so it's very significant. It's very significant. And I want you to understand what I'm speaking about is not necessarily the same thing as Ashe. Your sensitivity to the auric fields and to the vibrations around you really comes as a result. If we really want to get into it, I mean, we could get back to the Star Wars thing. It comes from the value and the amount of mitochondria that you have within you. Now, what are mitochondria? Okay. They used to be called cell blasters, right? And, before I think 1956, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, these are the powerhouses of your cells. Okay. These are what empower your cells. And certain cells in your body have no mitochondria, like your red blood cells, right? But if you look, like I said, when we could take it to Star Wars, if you look at the Phantom Menace Star Wars, you have, what was his name? Quan Jinn. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi's master. And when he tested Anakin Skywalker, he tested him for midichlorians. Now, one of the older names of mitochondria was midichlorians. Okay? So it's significant, right? And he said, wow, he has more midichlorians than I've ever seen in anyone in my life. So what are the midichlorians? They are what they are the respirators of your cells. So they're the living forces that exist inside of your cells. So if you can look at it like that, they're like the souls of your cells. So some have more grain-like soul energy inside of them than others, which makes them more sensitive to other soul energies that exist around them. In fact, the term mitochondria, the word itself means strings of grain. Mito, it's Greek, or mitos, and it means threads, or like a thread of something or string of something. And chondrion means a granule, like a grain of sand. So it's like a thread of a grain. Well, what does a thread do? It threads and connects things together, right? So the more midichlorians you have inside of you, the more you're sensitive to the threading and the connectivity of things around you. You see? So, and as we grow older, a lot of times our sickness and our aging comes as the overwhelming of our mitochondria. Sometimes we eat too much, or, we don't get enough rest. And there's a whole bunch of things that we do to damage our mitochondrial DNA. And by the way, exercise and good eating can repair them. So before that question comes in, because you can find that out yourself, you don't have to actually ask me that, but I know some of you will. Exercise and good eating. All right, that's just a simple way to look at it. But some of us are born, and when I say good eating, eating less, by the way, not overeating. And some of us are born with more than others. Again, I'm going to go back to it. Does that mean that some are better than others, or no, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that we're all born with a different responsibility to our culture. That's the Jed. Okay, some of us are born to be pillars of the culture because of the sensitivity that we have to the things that are around us and how it affects the liberty of said culture. It affects the liberty of the mind. It affects the liberty of the life force. Okay? In fact, going back to George Lucas, I'm remembering all these little Lucas facts. In the original scripting of Star Wars, you know how they say, may the force be with you? It was originally, may the force of life be with you. And then they cut of life because they said it was too long. So may the force be with you. It was smoother. Okay. So again, there's a reference there to mitochondria, which is the force of life that exists within your cells. You see? So, and that's different than Ashe. I want you to be clear on something, because the energy that exists around you that we're speaking about, the subtle and vital energy, is generated by the life forces around you. Whereas Ashe or Chi or Moyo or Prana, it exists despite, it exists throughout dimension. You see? So, and some will say that, oh, your Chi actually comes from living force, because some believe that the Chi actually comes from the body itself. You know, like your body develops Chi, but that's not necessarily true. The body does have its own vital and ambient energy, as well as its own Chi force, and it can generate more Chi, but Chi does not originate inside of or even with the physical body. Okay, so that's something for you all to kind of to know. So just kind of getting back again to the significance of why culture, because again, you know, I'm sharing this because I don't want you all to think that when we speak about culture, again, that is extracurricular. And I know I've said that about 4 times, was because I really want to drive that point home, because I see so many speak about it in the same way, like, I have this and I have my culture. No, it doesn't work like that, because the culture is the subset that provides the significance for the what you do, what your career is, or what your profession is, or what your business is. The culture provides the significance for all that because it determines where we're going next. All right. And you're more sensitive to where you're going next if you're more sensitive to the vital force and the sensitivities that are around you. So like I said, you have energies like Chi. And again, if you see, whether it be in your studies or whatever, whether you're talking about the force or ether or Chi or prana or pneuma, okay, we're talking about, or even organ is another word that you'll see sometimes, or just life force. Okay, we're speaking about the subtle things that exist around us. And a lot of times, because we don't have a slowing of ourselves or a sensitivity of those things, we find ourselves wrapped into cultures that are actually destroying our sensitivity to the life forces around us. Like, I'll give you an example. Or even in the Hebraic system, you may have Ruach. For any of you who study the Kabbalah and you know the term Ruach, it would associate itself with that. But, you know, like, or Ruach, sometimes you'll see it. Sometimes it's Ruach and sometimes it's Ruach. R-U-A-H, or it might be R-U-A-C-H, Ruach. Okay, so again, the prana, pneuma, chi, ruach, life force, there's similar vibrations, but, and even wind. But see, these all exist within the kingdom, within the realm. And within the realm, you'll have different expressions of that force that hopefully will lead you to the realm of the deities. So a lot of times, that's where the cultural lockdown comes in, because we don't even get as far as to even develop the sensitivities to the energies around us. And that's just a part of our living. You see, that's not the destination. So that's why you can have individuals that can use those vital forces to harm people or to help people, you know, or they can use them to create pleasant experiences, or they can use them to create unpleasant experiences, because they're all just they're just part of the tools of your life that culture affords you. You see, so that's why you'll see some world cultures are based on, they're very spiritual in nature. If you look at anime, for instance, you know, most anime, and please don't test me on the anime. I'm not good at anime at all. I'm not really a collector, but once in a while I'll find something. Usually, honestly, it comes by recommendation. I have a good brother of mine who watches a lot of anime, and he'll bring by movies for me, you know, and that's how I really got into it. And one of the sisters who I've dealt with, she was heavy into anime, so she used to help me out. But what you'll notice, the themes a lot, you have these demons in anime. It's always some type of spiritual theme. A lot of times it's even a Christian theme, but there's an inherent spirituality that exists in anime. And even if you look at the live action movies of those same Japanese cultures, you know, look at how their ancient past is depicted. Despite what they've done, despite the people they've enslaved and their times being enslaved, you never see that in their films. But just look at how the dignity and the regality that's always portrayed there. So in essence, in some cultures, you have a constant and consistent move towards a deepening of the spiritual sensitivity of the members of that culture. Okay. And when you're deepening this spiritual sensitivity, you give them an opportunity to rise to their higher self, to rise back up to their real selves, as opposed to some cultures, they make entertainment out of dousing the spiritual fires of the members of their culture purposely. You know, they make entertainment out of being inebriated. Being drug addicts now becomes entertainment. You see? And you have to pay close attention to this, because it's very deliberate in terms of what it's keeping you from. Like, I remember years ago, because I remember when hip hop first came out, like when hip hop was created, you know, so I remember the significance and the movements and the messages that were shared. And obviously, you know, because everyone says, oh, it was all about partying in the beginning. Not necessarily. Yeah, you had that, but you did have different forms of it. But I remember, because you got to remember, New York City, 80s and the late 70s was a very violent place to be. Like, when you look at some of those movies, you know, where people are riding on a train and dudes are walking through snatching pocketbooks and stuff, and you probably think, if you're not from New York, you think it's exaggerated, but no, it was really like that. You know, the trains got all the graffiti on them inside. It just looks like you're riding inside of a trash compactor. That's what New York was like back then. You know, it was like Kumo D said, the Wild Wild West. It was a very rough place to be. So, you know, and that's why you had things like Bernard Getz, the subway vigilante. You know, this guy was just, white guy was just like, you know, I'm sick of this, and started just blasting at dudes. Like, because, you know, getting robbed and pickpocketed or just strong armed in the city was normal play for commuters, you know, and he just wasn't having it. He ended up popping somebody 2 times. You know, he got off the first time, and then I think he got off the second time. You know, but that was the Koch era. You know, New York was a very rough place to be. So a lot of the music back then, you know, when it spoke about drugs, it spoke about the devastating effects that drugs was having on the community, you see. And then it transitioned from that to speaking about some of the devastating effects that drugs were having on people personally, in terms of what was happening to their friends. And then you had a transition from that to people talking about how they had to sell drugs now to survive. You see, they didn't want to do it, and they were trying to stop and everything, and they were apologizing to the community through their music, but they have to do this just to put food on the table, you know. And then it transitioned from that in the 90s to the glorification of the drug dealer. You know, like, now everybody is a drug kingpin all of a sudden. And then it went from glorifying the drug dealer to now the glorification is on the drug user. So you got people talking about, popping pills and sipping all kind of concoctions and things like that, and just walking around blasted out of their mind, totally tweaked and wasted. And that's what's cool now. So before, it used to be cool to rhyme about having to sell drugs but getting out of the game. It was cool to present the social commentary, but now it's actually cool to be the loser, because back in the days, the person who took the drug, like if you call somebody a crackhead, they were considered to be the loser. Even if you call somebody an alcoholic, or like we used to say back in the days, a bum or a nut. They slept on park benches. Oh, the person's a nut. They're a bum. They're alky. That was considered to be an insult. And now the culture has transitioned itself, or the culture has been introduced, where the actual loser is the one to be glorified now. You see? Now think about the effects that has overall, because now it makes losing a significant thing to do. And then you find that same thread go across into other places of the culture. Look at the clothing. Look at the clothing of yesteryear. When I say yesteryear, look of the 50s and the 60s, and how presenting yourself a certain way, as clean and as sharp. We use terms like sharp. Oh, you look sharp. And that term was used up through the 80s. Oh, you look real sharp. To look clean and to look sharp was the in style thing to do. And then there was a time period with the grunge look was the look. Don't tuck your shirt in. Take your shirt out. Don't comb your hair. Get a shape up, but just go with the nappy look. Go with the half dead look. So it's important for you to understand that these cultural movements and these introductions by extraneous forces are purposeful. And what they're doing is they're keeping you locked down to the sensitivity that's around you. Now, I'm not saying that if you go out there and wear a 3-piece suit with a chain watch, and you swinging the watch and coming in like Cab Calloway with a big hat, now all of a sudden you're going to be able to shift objects and read people's minds. So please don't get it twisted. What I'm really just speaking about is how sometimes the culture is shaped for us to keep us in a disopportune position. Okay, to keep us thinking and moving in a certain direction, but a lot of times it doesn't have us moving towards the inner sanctum of our spiritual power, which then unleashes the real deities that we are. Because remember, this whole universe that we're operating in of chi and prana, these forces are created by not so much chi, but many of them are created by the life forces that exist. So what happens when the life forces expire? Then those forces will no longer be needed. So therefore, we know that there's something that exists on top of those forces that we really should be tapping into. Because if there's an equality between someone who wants to cause harm and someone who wants to help, if we both have access to the same power, then we know now we're still in the middle of the video game. And it's about who's going to run and grab the gun first. We're both wrestling for the gun. Okay. So that means there's something that exists beyond that. And it's really important when we speak about culture. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is that a lot of times there's a very simplistic point of view that individuals hold that we have to get out of. And that simplistic point of view is that there is only good and bad. There is only off and on. There is only right and wrong. And even from a racial perspective, there is only black and white. I look at some of the discussions that were had surrounding that in recent months on the community show, and some of the comments are really asinine, because individuals have a very immature and illogical perspective and approach when it comes to race, when it comes to genetics. And because they're still locked into their cultural light code lockdown, they can only see things being one way. They see white, black, but if you would even to look at it from a more rational point of view, if you're a black person, do you think white people are your only competition? That would be asinine. What about Indian people? What about Asian people? What about Latino people? So when you start to look at it from that perspective, you realize there's a culture that's being introduced to you that's keeping you dumb. It's keeping you dumb. And you have agents and ministers of this culture And their job is to keep you dumb. So even if you look at the conscious community is one giant sleeping pill to keep you dumb. Now you think you're learning, but I'm learning this, I'm learning that. Okay, but what does it affect on the long end based on your cultural imperative and your cultural goal? And then we have to ask this question: do you have a cultural goal? Do you have a cultural imperative? If you have a sensitivity to vibrations around you, it would be easier to grab onto that cultural goal and imperative. Now, many of you may say, well, my goal is to be free. You know, you'll pick something abstract like that, and that's a part of your sleeping pill. So how do we define freedom? And many may say, well, I want to be free. All you got to do is say, well, what does it mean? What is free? What is freedom? They wouldn't be able to define it. I want to free my people. Oh, really? Okay. Who are your people? And then watch you start with the ums. Well, my people are, people who look like me. Who looks like you? Well, I guess black people. Well, black, or is it Moors? Or is it melanin dominant? Or is it Africans? Or is it African Americans? Or is it Nubians? Is it Kemites? All of them. You see? Now, please don't get offended. If you do, the hell with it. But try not to get offended. And excuse, I didn't mean to use the profanity just now. But, so my point is, a lot of times, because we lack the real cultural imperative, we lack the sensitivity and the clarity that's needed to actually affect change in our environment. And we lose sight, and we don't even respect those who have the vital mitochondric concentrations that do have that sensitivity, that can see those things, that can sense and feel those things. That's why sometimes when you listen to some of the live shows and people talk to me, and they'll say, oh, you're not letting me finish what I'm saying. I already know what you're saying because I feel the sensitivity between you and I. You're not sensitive to it. So you don't even know what you're saying because you're not sensitive to the powerhouses, the mitochondric powerhouses that exist inside of yourself. You're not even sensitive to your own life force. So you don't even know what you're saying. You're just parroting mechanisms of a sick culture that were given to you. But you don't even hear the cry in your own soul. You see? Now, you may feel that none of that exists, and I'm just making up something in order to not listen to people or to cut them off or whatever. And, of course, that's your choice to think something like that. But those who have ears to hear, like we say, if you got ears to hear and eyes to see, well, what are we saying? What does that really mean? That really means those who have an energetic sensitivity. That's what that actually means. Those who have an energetic sensitivity will hear what's being said, will see what's going on, can feel what's happening. And others who don't have that don't and can't. And they may never develop that ability because it's not for everyone to be the Jed. It's not for everyone to be the Heru. But certainly, if we're a part of the same community and culture, then we have to respect those who are and know our lane and know our place. You might not have that. But it doesn't mean that there aren't other things that you can do to help sustain the environment and help to sustain the liberty of what we're all operating in and out of. For instance, if I'm sharing this information with the community, we need somebody who's going to make the computer that I'm going to use to log onto Blog Talk. We need someone who's going to sustain the fiber optic lines to get the information to you, or to create the headphones that you're listening on, or the phones, or the headset that I may be using right now, so forth and so on. Because all of this helps to sustain the culture and the moving forward of it. Everyone is not going to be a priest or a priestess. Everyone is not going to have the same level of spiritual sensitivity. And sometimes some of you mistake spiritual sensitivity for just being emotional people. It's not the same thing to constantly be able to emit emotion or to be very insecure and get emotional whenever something comes into your path. That's not the same as having a finer sensitivity to the strings of granules that exist between all forces, objects, and things. There's a huge difference. Okay? And I can tell you right now, for all of you who jump on the thread and say, well, I have that sensitivity, you don't have it. Because people who have it don't say things like that. You know, it's very similar to the way individuals with real power interact with each other. Like I remember one of my very close brothers, a sparring partner that I used to fight with a lot. I remember we used to laugh and joke about this because watching us fight was like the most boring thing in the world. And it's because we would sit in front of each other. We would sit and pose and in stance for like 2 minutes before any blow was thrown. Okay, because and I learned about that when I was like before I was even heavy into martial sciences and I was just boxing, because I started out boxing, you know. And I remember a brother saying to me once, he was like, man, you look at two black belts fight, it's the most boring thing in the world because no one's going to strike first. And I didn't really get it until I was at that, what we call master level. And you guys know I have a issue with that term master sometimes, but I do understand its place. There is a place and time where we would call someone a master, but you know, when two masters come against each other, they know that the power of the Ashe that flows through them, the way Ashe works is the more you attack and the more you try to inflict damage on the container of the Ashe, the stronger it gets. It's like the Hulk. You know, the more you hurt him and the angrier he gets, the stronger he gets. So if you punch me, I may even feel the pain, but I'm not actually going to sustain damage. See, that's why you have like individuals who walk on hot coals or have knives and daggers trying to, you know, people try to poke it through their skin and they can't get it through. Or in some cultures, they'll take spears and they'll pick a person up in the air by the spears. You know, they'll like, almost like if they're stage diving, they'll put them in their stomachs and in their chests and their arms, and they'll have like 5 people pick them up in their ears by the spears, but the spears won't actually be able to pierce their bodies because of the amount of chi that they have flowing through them. So when you have two masters that come against one another, it's the same type of thing. You know, two masters are not really going to want to fight each other. They're not really going to want to inflict any type of damage on one another, because they understand that anytime they try to injure or send an explosive blast of energy to one another, that the other person is going to be able to handle that energy because of the large amount of Ashe or chi electricity that's flowing through them, and it's only going to make them stronger. You see, it's like a subconscious thing that you know when you get to a certain level. So when you have two masters standing in front of them fighting, you know, the only time someone will actually throw a punch or a kick is just because they just want to get it started. Okay, I'll be the lesser, you know, just so we can get something going here. Okay. But in most instances, it's not going to be all this conflict. Now, if you look within the conscious groups, look at all the conflict. Look at all the debating. Masters don't debate each other. They really don't. You know, so even though like Dr. Clark said, you know, those who are not on my level, I teach, you know, and those who are, you're the only ones that will be able to debate me. You know, I'm paraphrasing. The truth is, you didn't see him in 100 debates. Because when two masters or several masters get in the room with one another, that's not really where the interest lies, because their minds are thinking differently. It's only the lessers that choose to try to inflict damage or try to prove themselves against the power and the force that's flowing through the master. You see? And sometimes people may perceive that as the master being dismissive, but it's not that. High power is not obtained that way. High knowledge and high wisdom is not attained that way through conflict. Okay, it's obtained through being able to synchronistically put someone through a strenuous experience while at the same time testing and pulling their mental limitations. So you may have someone holding a certain yoga pose for 30 minutes while you have them reflecting on something. It opens up the mind to certain things. So, and it's other ways. I'm not just saying it's the only way for one to achieve enlightenment, but again, if you look at the culture, a lot of times we have a culture of a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting, and it's just so acceptable, and we don't understand that we're not growing that way. And a lot of times when you're hoisting injurious statements towards those who have more power than you, you're only making them stronger. I've said that so many times. I had someone say that to me once that, like they were like, man, you're like unbreakable. Because I've been through a lot of things in life. And I said, it doesn't make sense to try to hurt me. I remember saying that to someone. In fact, I'll tell you what I was saying it to a judge. Let me just keep it 100. as we say. And I said, doesn't matter what you do to me. I'm going to come back stronger, and I'm going to hurt you for doing this. And I said that, to a Supreme Court judge. Nothing hurts me. Now I may get a little pain or whatever, but I always come back stronger. I've jammed fingers before. Now the fingers are stronger. I remember I had to teach my youth that, in fighting. Yeah, sometimes the only time you jam fingers is when you hold your hands wrong. Sometimes you don't know how to hold your hands. You got your thumbs in the wrong places and things like that. They get jammed. Okay. You get a little sprain, but it's going to grow back stronger when it heals. Now you're going to have a calcium buildup. So now that fist is going to hurt even more when you hit somebody. That's what the life of a master is like. When we take hits, we don't break down and want to quit. We don't get emotional and start a whole debate and go film 5 YouTube videos because somebody says something we don't like. We take the pain. It doesn't really cause real injury, but the pain actually makes us stronger. You see? Now that's ingrained within the culture of the master. That's master culture right there. To be able to take that and redirect it. That's the signs of your Eshu. That's the red and the black. Well, what is he doing inside of the black? He's taking what he received in the red in battle, and he's taking it over to the dark side, to the black, and he's turning it into something. Well, what is the signs of Darth Vader? He took all of that anger and fear and jealousy, and he turned it into great power. And you could do that with anything if you have a sensitivity to be able to flow on each side like that. Not everyone possesses that. And let me just say this. Most people don't possess it. Okay, so again, before everyone jumps up and says, I got that. That's how I am because I've been through so much in life. And da-da-da. If you're talking like that, then you don't have it because the master doesn't speak that way. In fact, most true masters are pretty quiet. I feel like this is a show about Star Wars. I got to take it back to Star Wars. If we look at Darth Vader, listen to when he breathes. Right? You hear that noise every time he comes around. See, this is science, and your culture allows you to see the significance in all things. Now, we know that he's on a breathing machine because his body was all messed up and everything like that. But that's not why George Lucas emphasized the sound of James Earl Jones and the breathing like that. There was a science that was being taught for those with ears to hear. If you study Qigong, if you study Tai Chi, if you study many systems, pranayama, that deal with the science of breath, what you're taught typically, even in your resting stage, in your normal and casual stage, is to take long, deep breaths all the time. Not just when you're in activity, but all the time. To always breathe like that. So what does that do? When you breathe like that, you're going to notice something. It gives you a sensitivity to things that are around you. Just try it. Close your eyes and breathe like that, long and deep. And try to do it as often as you can. What you're going to find is that you won't be speaking as often. You heard me say a bunch of times, I don't know if any of you really listened, but I'm a master listener. And that I'll say, I am a master listener. And I enjoy listening more than talking. You know, but in order for me to do that, I have to be a master breather. So when you're listening to Darth Vader, because you notice when Darth Vader is breathing, even when he's fighting, notice the fight scenes, he's never like, it's still long and steady. It never picks up. And that's why he's able to say things like, I feel a presence like I've not felt since. They all can feel these subtle changes in the force around them because they're quiet. They breathe. They take in the environment. They're not yip-yapping all the time. They're not debating. They're not arguing about nothing. They're focused on the end goal and the mission, like a samurai. You see, because that's basically what the Jedi are. They're like samurai, space samurai, you see. So the culture becomes extremely important because it imbues you with the value of things like breathing and the significance of it. It allows you to watch a movie like Star Wars and see all of those things and how the realization of the rebirthing of spirit, or even the language that exists inside of air, because air has its own language. There was a whole Greek deity. There's a whole practice developed around the language of air. It's called psychology, coming from the Greek archetype Psyche. Okay, dealing with you had the story of Psyche and Eros. I think I broke down that story one of the Valentine's Day shows, because Eros is actually the Cupid baby. Yeah, I'm pretty sure one of the Valentine. I think I did Death Note and Valentine's Day. I think that's the name of the show. And I broke down the science of Psyche and Eros. But you remember, your mitochondria, they are responsible for the respiration of the cells. So you see the significance of breathing once again. And breathing is how you power your body. They're the powerful force, the organ of the chi of the body, you see. And they're how you absorb and take in the life force through air. Now, all of this is given to us by healthier culture. But unfortunately, so many of us are drowning in sick cultural transmissions that are just locking down our potential. It's locking down our maturation price. It's locking down our ideas of what our primacy is. What are our prime objectives? What are our prime determinants? What are our intimate dimensions? Our spontaneous objectives, our spontaneous interpersonal exertions, our understandings of gender and framework, and what it truly means to be aggressive versus assertive. Things like that, because we haven't really even understood the transition between the I and the me, things like that. And our culture gives us evidence of whether we're developing our more divine characteristics, or if we're devolving into more humanistic, animalistic characteristics. Because, of course, we should be moving towards divine, and that may mean that there's a socialization that needs to exist between us and amongst us in order for us to be able to determine. Now, it's so difficult sometimes when we're so wrapped in ego and we can't tell one another, you're not hitting the mark. If we've all agreed on a certain cultural positioning, and based on that cultural positioning, we should be able to tell each other if we're hitting the mark or not. But so often we cannot. So often we're not allowed to do that because of a wayward ego, because of a lack of development in our narcissistic stage. And I broke that down. I don't remember what show where I broke down the real meaning. Well, not only the narcissistic mythology, but the real meaning and proper placement of a developed ego through the paths of narcissism. So living the culture is significant to living and owning the power, to owning the peace, to owning the cultural imperative, to owning the paths to greatness. Living the culture, because the culture again cultivates the individual and provides significance to all the things that the individual is involved in. And it shows the activities that are not significant. That's why the master, who is aware and always sensitive to the cultural tools around them, don't really argue and debate, because they know that it's insignificant to achieving the imperative of whatever the culture sets out to be. They share culture. They share ideas. They don't aggressively try to implant ideas. Anyone who tries to aggressively implant an idea is not a master. They're looking to influence those who have the potential of mastery because of the amount of mitochondria, active and healthy mitochondria inside of them. Because wouldn't you want to be able to influence those who have the greatest sensitivity and power to affect the environment around them? You think about that for a moment. Because aren't those the reality shifters or the reality shapers? And you would want to be able to persuade and influence them towards what it is that you want to do. Now, how is it that you would do that? You would have to create a new mind in them. So that way you could use that mitochondria, or as George Lucas would put it, the midichlorians, for your own purposes. So they begin to shape the world for you through their attachment, through the subtle and vital energies of the world. And even at the end of the day, like I said, that is not the end all be all. The shaping of the reality is not the end all be all, because the reality is temporal. These are tools that we're supposed to be using to create the stair steps we need. You know, imagine taking your mind and forming the steps, just like a step pyramid, just like an altar, and forming the steps that you need through your ability to shape the forces and the energies around you, a step right back to Orun, or back to heaven, or to the fifth dimension. Imagine using the stair steps around you, or the ability around you, to create that altar, to alter your consciousness, to move higher into that space. Well, wouldn't that tool really be for that? And not just to make lateral movements, like so many of us are locked into through our culture. But if we have a culture of ascension, as Anu is, what are Anu? People from heaven. So even within its very moniker and its very name, there is a culture of ascension that's inherent. Because we're speaking about reenacting and reliving our heavenly culture. Now, is heavenly culture self-righteousness? No. There are many different heavens. There are warrior heavens. There are monk heavens. There are dog heavens. There's hoe heavens. There's pimp heavens. You see? Now, of course, people who have a very simplistic view and understanding of energy and the movements of consciousness, they'll take great offense to that statement. And we're coming into a place now where there is such a wide broadcasting of different faiths and ideas that exist across Newt, or as some would say, the net or internet, that we no longer have to figure out a way to cater to everyone. That's why I say often, if you don't like what I'm saying, go to someone else's channel, because somebody is saying what you want to hear. Trust me. There's a lot of information out here. This is a beautiful time now in that sense, man. You can really find your communities now. Like, you can really find a group of people who are agreeing with where you want to be and what you want to do. It's out there now. You know, so one lone teacher or one lone group of Jegna do no longer have to figure out how to become acceptable to everyone, because there is someone to service everyone. You see? So when I speak about things that many would consider to be hedonistic or debaucherous or chauvinistic even, it's fine, because there are other people who you can go and utilize for your entertainment. But you won't find contradiction here. So it's so much easier to sustain the truth than to try to sustain the contradiction, because then you got to write notes. What did I say on this date? I have over 500 shows on the internet. So if I was full of lies and contradiction, it would be really difficult to go back and find which ones clash with the other ones. I'd have to probably just take them all down and start over, or figure out ways to lie about the lies, and just keep going like that. What's easier to do is just to tap into the internal life force inside of me and the expression of culture that I hold, because that same thread of connectedness that I have with that perspective, some of you out there will have the same one. You see? So there is a group that's already there if you just scrape away the layers and allow yourself to be free and honest in where you're at and what it is that you're looking to do. And that's one of the beauties about where society has gone now, even from a cultural sense. If you even look at the way advertisements are sent to you now. Remember, not too long ago, anytime someone wanted you to buy something, they had to present a very corporate image to you. They had to say, hello, I'm such and such from such and such corporation, and we've been established since 1970, such and such, and we provide the best vacuum bags for your such and such, such and such. And then you would listen to that and say, man, they sound professional. Then they give you a card. Oh, nice card. Nice weight on this card. Ooh, gold leaf font. Wow, this is an established business. And that would give you the faith and the surety to patronize that business. Now you get newsletters, or you get little pop-ups on social media where now they can use different coding to put your name in the newsletter. Hey, Malik, how's it going? Just wanted to let you know about this cool new product if you want to check it. You see how the advertisements are? So that there's an informalness that's now kicked in. And you have to have a sensitivity to notice that around you. So the old stoic, sterile model is no longer necessary. You see, because we live in a society with all the social media that has now made people extremely unsociable. People are starving for friends. So through most advertisements, now, when they're sent out, there's an assumption of friendship. You see? Hey, Jamal, how's it going, man? Hope you enjoyed your weekend. Da-da-da-da-da. Let me tell you something about it. I just checked out. It's been doing wonders for me. The such and such pill. I keep an erection for 7 days. Whatever it is. Right? And now the person feels like they're having a real conversation. You got to be able to peep game. But it just lets you know that there's very little excuse now to not keep it real. There's very little excuse because there's a lane for everything now. I mean, sometimes you go on YouTube and you'll see people who are like YouTube stars that you never heard of. You look at their videos, they got like 1 million views. It's like, I've never even, who is this person? Right? Because a lot of people on the planet. And they're finding people who they can attach to. You see? So what does your culture drive you to do? And are you living your real honest to raw culture? The culture that is feeding the life force inside of your cells? Or are you purposely locking down a life force that is inside of your cells because you're trying to conform with what someone else told you should want and have at this point? How many of you are still chasing dollars that you don't even know what to do with? Think about that. Still working jobs that you hate because you need money to pay for utilities and things to live a life that you don't even like. And then when you do accumulate some funds, you don't even know what to do with the money. So you just figure out other ways to put yourself in debt, or you find other opiates. Well, I got extra money. I'm going to go buy, I don't know, some liquor. I'm going to go on a cruise and get drunk and eat. And then when I come back and I'm 7 pounds heavier, I'll give some money to a gym. And, it just goes into this cycle of what I don't want, what I don't want, what I don't want, what I don't want, what I don't want. Because no one's really being honest about what they truly do want. So they're locking down the cultural tools that are already available to them. How many people do I speak to and they're speaking about relationships and not really honest about what they truly want? So of course you're not getting it. Be honest. You know, I got 50, 60-year-old women saying I want someone to come in and I want a family. You don't want a family at 56 years. You done already had 4 or 5 children and raised them. You really want to be married again? You really want to lay in a bed next to someone every night again? Have to get up early and make breakfast and, you know, wash socks and, you know, and all. That's what you really want? Be honest. You don't want that. You just want sex. You want sex and companionship, and you want to know that you're not going to die alone. And when something happens to you, like you get sick or you fall down, that there's somebody who will take you to the hospital or meet you at the hospital. Keep it real. And a lot of you guys, keep it real on what you want. You know, even when it comes to your relationships. Not all of you want wives. You think you have to say that you want a wife. Why? Let's be honest. Most of you just want a little sex and a little companionship. Maybe you want some children. You probably don't want them right now. You probably want them later. But even those of you who do want children, you may not want to be as involved in those children's lives. Keep it real. See, this is what I'm talking about. You know, and I said I was going to do a whole series on this. I don't know what I'm entitled yet, but we got to be more honest about this, because there is a whole set of cultural value and strength that's waiting for us that we're not tapping into, because we're pretending to be something that we never wanted to be, never could be, by a set of people who gave it to us that never wanted to be those things and never could be those things. Let's keep it real. You know, like when people speak to me about plurality, and for the record, I'm not a polygamist. All right. Polygamous means multiple marriage, and that could be a marriage where you have one woman and many men, or one man, many women, or many men and many women. We're speaking about polyamorous relationships, and I'm not into marriage, not in the sense that many of you perceive marriage. So polygamy, polygyny, polyandry, or polyamory doesn't even apply to what I do and what my household is, because I've forgotten some of those questions. All right. I have family, and that's it. You know, so I have some people in my family, some people not my family. That's all. It's not that deep, you know. But when you start to introduce a lot of different hybrid cultural ideas without establishing a cultural base for yourself, it becomes unnecessarily deep. It becomes unnecessarily complicated. You know, and then you start to feel a measure of guilt behind not being able to perform or meet a fictional meter. That's ridiculous. You can live how you want. You can raise your children how you want. You find a cultural continuum that works for the advancement and the ascension of the group spirituality, and then you guys figure out what works best for the ascension and development and sustaining of the group. Period. However that looks. That's why a lot of these conversations surrounding what one should do or what one shouldn't do, those conversations are purely ridiculous. Who am I to say that? Who are you to say that? You know, so like even when people call those questions, should I do this? Should I put this? Should I put that? Should you? Let's think about that for a second. Should you? What does your culture dictate? And of course, usually an individual would ask a question like that doesn't have any culture. You see? But I in the coming year, I told you in 2017, Gregorian, more importantly in June, because my new year again starts in June, the model is going to change up once again. Because there's a level of, I've given you all a lot of the foundations. In fact, if you really deal with these shows from Enlightenment and Transformation, from Masterminds Monday, Thunderground Thursdays, to Anua Safo, Foundational Friday, Community, Chief Speaks, there's a lot. You really don't need much else, to be honest with you. And I designed and structured the shows for that reason, to give individuals a base. And now once you have the base, now we can speak about some real cultural expectations. You see, that's the next conversation. Let's talk about some real honest cultural expectations. What is it that we really want to do? What is it that we really don't want to do? What works for us in terms of our ascension and what doesn't? Who can be here and who can't be here? And your culture provides those expectations. You know, like, for instance, sometimes you hear the show and somebody will call in with half-truths and you see, I'll cut them down, I'll pull the sword out, cut them out. Because it's disrespectful to talk to me while you're spitting half-truths. That's disrespectful to do that to me. So I don't allow it. Now, your culture, that may be perfectly fine. And maybe because you're not a critical listener, you don't read, maybe you don't even have a functional brain. You know, so someone will call and they'll lie and you'll be like, why you not letting them talk? Because it's disrespectful to fill my ears with that garbage. You know, sometimes people think that they should be allowed to say whatever they feel like saying because it's what they feel. That's garbage. So I should be allowed to not hear certain things if it's garbage. Just because you feel something doesn't make it true. Many times what you feel is not true. It's just what you're feeling. It's just your reaction to something. And everyone should not have to be oppressed with your emotional reactions. That's the purpose for the long breathing. So we can stay centered through our experiences, you see. And we're not dictating our emotions onto someone, because many of us are moving through the world emotionally unbalanced because of a sick culture. So if you're emotionally unbalanced and you're foundating your logic or your reasoning on your emotions, then your logic and your reasoning is imbalanced. And not everyone wants to sit underneath the toxicity of that. That is all right. Now, that's not the same as cutting somebody off because you don't like what they're saying or it doesn't make you feel good. See, that's where we get to the immature simplicity that we need to get out of. I don't like how that made me feel. So, grow up. You know, some of us really have to grow up. It's, you know, it gets a little ridiculous. But that's why I said the beauty is now on the internet, man. There's so many different shows and different people talking about so many different things from so many different countries that just keep thumbing through till you find something that does make you feel empowered. Now, hopefully, if you have a cultural imperative, you're using that empowerment to do something that makes sense. Because again, when we think about our ability to affect the subtle energies around us, it's not dependent on if we're right or wrong. It's not dependent on our righteousness. It just depends on our level of sensitivity. So someone who's a very snake-like person usually has a high level of sensitivity to read people. And they'll use that to take advantage of people. You see? Hillary Clinton's a great example of that. You can see it in her. She can work a room like none other. Oof. She's a master. Now, what are her intentions? That's a different question. That's, you know. Whereas you look at like a Donald Trump. He doesn't have that sensitivity. What are his intentions? You know? So yeah, we've lost a lot of our understanding and our connectedness because we have a lot of toxins that are alive and active inside of us because of a toxic culture. And that toxic culture creates sick spirits within us. Those spirits then go on to create energy and motion or emotions. And our lives are a whirlwind of all of these emotional doubts and these emotional insecurities and this emotional cloud and an emotional delusion. And it takes those of us who are the Jed or who are the Awo or who are the priest and the priestess, the real ones. Because you got a lot of people who are priests and priestesses or Awos who are not really priests and priestesses or Awos. They were not called to be that. They don't really have a talent for it. They don't really have the DNA for it because it is a genetic thing. There's a genetic spiritual evolution. And like I said, when you look at the mitochondrial DNA and our sensitivity to the environment around us, that's a start. If you don't have that, no, you don't make a good priest or priestess. I don't care how many songs you know. I don't care how many prayers you know, how many dances you know. You can see it. You can see it in the lack of sensitivity. You can see it in the lack of awareness. You can see it in, most importantly, the lack of effectiveness. you know. And again, a lack of sensitivity, or sensitivity is not just listening to nonsense. Sometimes you're so sensitive to nonsense, you say, stop. I'm not taking this in. You know, sometimes somebody lying or telling half-truths or going on unfounded emotional rants is like listening to debaucherous music that is breaking down your DNA, and it's scaring it and pounding it because you're so sensitive to that. There was a movie that came out years ago with Michael Clark Duncan about this very thing called The Green Mile. You know, many of you remember that movie. It had some elements that were not as complimenting to melanin dominant people, but I certainly related to it. You know. But that has been our segment. Don't forget, end of the month, live student calling. Okay, I'm not gonna make a big deal out of the end of the year show because this is not the end of the year, so we're just gonna keep it moving. All right, but definitely starting in the next fiscal quarter, I'll be releasing the new series for 2017 for the topics that we'll be covering. So we're going to hit some other angles, and I'm only basing that based on the Western financial calendar, not on anything else, but it being a financial calendar. For those of you who are on Android phones, make sure you download the Anu Nation mobile app. Okay, we now have it in production. Like I said, the Apple one will be coming out soon. But I like using the app. I'm going to tell you the main thing I like using the app for. It's actually easier to listen to the shows on the app. Like, I don't know if some of you have noticed, but like on Blog Talk, sometimes if you try to play the shows and stuff on your phone, it freezes a lot, you know, but on the app, it's smooth. So I've been using the app to listen to community radio. So, I mean, there's more things on the app, of course, like starting in January, there'll be a word of the strong where I'm giving you some information every strong to reflect on. You can also go through your Sedula House classes, you know, from the app if you want as well. If you want to buy books, you go to the shopping section. If you want to join our New Life Ministries, there's go to the Join Us link, which is found in I think it's either Get Involved or Explore Anu. You can also, it's also a conglomerate for a lot of the posts on the Anu website. So like on Sedula House, you know how we have the training material, the free guides, like the spiritual baths and things like that. Well, if you go on the app and you go to our new websites and go to Sedula House, you'll see them all right there. And there's a search function on each one, so you can even search for what you want. So the main reason that I did the app was because I wanted a way for everyone to be able to connect to the Anu material more easily. And the app just seemed to make the most sense because that's where we're moving to now anyway. You know, people don't do websites as much anymore, but there's so much Anu information out there. And even more that I have even yet to release, I have to get to. But I wanted the easy way for people to tap in. Also, of course, the video channels are also in the app. So you can watch the videos that Brother Zach Latimer does, Right and Exact, straight from the app. And we got more video shows coming out in the coming fiscal year. You can, of course, watch your Chief Speaks and your community radio shows and whatever else, the Orisha shows, the lectures, all of that stuff is right there in the app, you know, through the media and audio section. Also, I have a music project that I've been working on for too long by the name of Nuamel. And I put some of the tracks that I did for that track, or I'm working on, I should say, in the app. So there'll be also a way there where you can actually listen to some of the music that I do, as well as the up and coming stuff, and you'll be able to purchase that soon. But I gave some free songs, like 3 or 4 songs up there that I like. You can definitely leave some feedback on that. Also, the Orisha mixes, all those mixtapes and stuff that I did, those are up there as well. So, again, the app is just an easy way to find everything. More so, it's free, and I know people were telling me that I should charge for the app, but maybe the next app I do. But this one, I just wanted something that people can connect to. And, I want to just thank everyone for the donations. Let me just put that out there. Everyone who has donated, sent offerings in for Sadula House, and sent offerings in for Eye of Haru. Thank you so very much, because yes, these things do cost money. I don't really talk about it, but like just the blog talk itself is like $40 a month. The app is, what I paid for the year, something like $600, something like that. The scheduling that we use, the scheduling thing cost me like $400 and something, so yeah, there's an expense associated with all this stuff. YouTube, of course, is free, but sometimes I do bring in, I have a brother who does like little filming and stuff, and I give him work to try to employ him, and let him film and do a little editing on the clips and stuff. So yeah, there are costs associated. So I know I don't broadcast that often because it's not my forte. But I just want to thank those who do send in just from their heart. It does go to good use, especially those of you who have donated to the Africa Initiative. And willfully, Ifa will let me share that information coming soon, because we got a lot of good things going on there. And in 2017, I actually wanted to organize a trip to Nigeria and Ghana, or Nigeria or Ghana, and do like a little Anu tour. But there were some things that occurred that kind of slowed up my schedule. So now I'm looking at 2018 to do it in a way that makes sense. We probably could do it for 2017, but I want to give people the opportunity to save up the money that they need to save up. Of course, we have our new land and homes there, so like staying there is nothing. It's just really the airfare, and I have a whole crew over there, equipped with chefs and everything, so the food and all that's not a problem. But in any event, as we go forward, I'll share more information on that. But I want to just thank everyone who has been contributing and those who have been leaving sensible comments. I know there were some questions asked. I will get to your questions. Some of them were really long, so I didn't, I'll probably do a separate show just to read them and to answer them. But, everyone who's just been riding and donating and, giving good energy, I want to thank you. And even those of you who've been just acting a fool, I want to thank you too, because like I said, when you send that energy towards a master, it only makes the master stronger, so it brings out the greatest, it brings out the strongest. But I just want to thank everyone just for being around and listening and for sharing the information. I always urge you, please share the videos and stuff with your friends and your family, because we're probably not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I don't have a big marketing campaign or anything like that. I just share it and I keep it moving. So I really rely on word of mouth for the information to get out there and stuff like that. Because even a newsletter costs, the MailChimp and all of that. And I know most people don't read newsletters as much, but I know there's a more intelligent way probably to get some of the word out. And one brother did step up, and so I will be getting back to you, brother. I did see your message in terms of the work that he does, the work that you do in terms of PR, and we'll see if maybe there's something in the budget for that. But I just wanted to impress upon all of you my gratitude. Honestly, my gratitude. Those of you who have volunteered. I know we haven't gotten all of you into position yet, but it's primarily because I want you to be able to get through our new spiritual training phase 1 first. Okay, but just for even a heartfelt coming forward and say, hey, if you need help with this or with that, I want to thank you for that. Because obviously some of you are seeing that there's work that goes into all of this, and you want to be a part of it. So thank you. And willfully, we'll be doing some more things in the coming year. We're going to be doing more physical meetups, like we'll be doing in June, the Solstice Our New Family retreat. I'm sure Sister Ty will share more information on that. But we want to start getting together, yearly doing our rituals together, whatever consecrations, whatever, just, building together. So we're working on that now, as well as quarterly retreats that will start after that for the women to do offerings and things like that together and ritual work. So we'll be consistently getting up with each other. And I don't care if it's 2 people. It doesn't even matter, as long as you consecrate and make that time and that moment sacred. I don't care if it's 1 person, and just make the time and the space sacred, and you'd be surprised what will ripple out from that. It's a small life force that powers the bigger cell. Just remember that. All right, so that's been our Chief Speaks, and remember, next strong is our student panel. Please call in. I don't have the new number on me. I had the old one memorized, but we got that new number now. But just definitely call in and please participate and share your feedback on this month's topics, and you can even speak about the year's topics. But primarily, of course, the end of the month will be about living the culture and the significance of that, and why it's important, and why it's needed, and what we're going to do going forward, which will be more what we'll be dealing with in 2017. Now, what are we going to do? Now that we found love, what are we going to do with it? All right. So this is Chief Yuya signing out, of course, for another Chief Speaks. Until such time.